Hi, welcome to today's Collaborative Solutions webinar, Take the Expert Approach to Designing Your Workday Financial Management Environment. My name is Kate Zagurski, and I'm a member of the Collaborative Solutions marketing team, coming to you today from Reston, Virginia. Those of you listening to today's webinar are in great company, as we have several of you joining us from all over the country to learn about the benefits of an interactive foundation data model readiness workshop. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. First, all participants are in listen-only mode and will be muted throughout the webinar. Second, if you have any questions, please submit them using the GoToWebinar chat box, and we will have a short Q&A at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to share a little bit about who we are. Collaborative Solutions is the longest tenured Workday deployment partner, but we are also a finance and HR transformation consultancy. It is our mission to help you get the best end-to-end experience from strategy and change management to deployment and post-production services. This gives us a holistic view on how to manage your needs and truly meet your strategic objectives. And we do this with over 450 customers in 125 countries with a 98% customer satisfaction rating. And we view customer satisfaction not in go lives, but in actual referenceability of our customers, because it is our goal to ensure that our customers are long-term partners, so they are able to adopt all the benefits of Workday as they grow. Now, I'd like to introduce today's webinar speakers and my fellow Collabi colleagues, John Gross and Matt Armstrong. John and Matt are our foremost experts in our Workday financial management practice. They collectively hold 10 Workday certifications and have led our most complex financial management implementations to date. John is the Vice President of our consulting services for financials, payroll, and student, and has over 20 years of ERP experience. Matt is our Director of our financials practice and has over 10 years of ERP experience. And with that, let's get started. John, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Welcome, everyone. So today, I just want to go real quick over the agenda of what we're going to discuss and what you can expect. First, we're going to give you a definition of the foundation data model, also known as the FDM, in case any of you out there are just beginning your journey and aren't familiar with that. Those two terms will be interchangeable. And then Matt will provide you with a work tag demonstration in one of our tenants, and followed by a reporting demonstration in one of our tenants. And then Matt will discuss the FDM Readiness workshop and what it can offer for you and how it benefits you. And then we'll follow that up with questions. So real quick, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of the financial practice by the numbers. We our financials practice has been operating since 2011. We have over 60 certified financials consultants at this point, and actually that number is growing and should be 75 or so here soon. We have worked with over 75 unique Workday financials customers on a little over 125 individual engagements. Within the practice, we were one of the original partners for Workday planning, and currently we have 10 consultants that are Workday planning certified. And then within our practice, we have 10 consultants who are delivery assurance certified, who do delivery assurance reviews on behalf of Workday. And then within our practice, we currently have 10 unique financial product leads, which is the most of any partner in the ecosystem outside of Workday themselves. And then, as Kate mentioned earlier, our definition of success goes beyond just implementing and going live. And to date, we have a 100% successful implementation rate, and that is our most important criteria for projects, is to be 100% successful and have a referenceable and happy customer. With that, we've not had to rely on Workday to come in and and remediate any of our projects or take over any of our projects, because success is simply what we do. And part of that success, part of our experience and foundation is that we are financials customer number 3. We use all of Workday internally. And so like you, we have been through the journey on the customer side as well, and know many of the trials and tribulations that you're going to, that you're dealing with, the things that you're trying to overcome, and so forth. So it's just a little bit of background on the practice. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt to jump straight into the FDM.
Appreciate it, John. Hey, everybody. My name is Matt Armstrong. We're going to kind of get into the foundational data model here and exactly what it is. And just we understand that, this is especially folks that are coming from a different ERP system, one, it's Oracle or, whatever the old system is, it's a big leap and a transition from the legacy system to what it is in Workday. So what we're doing with this foundational readiness is educating folks on what the FDM is, the high level journey on how we get there, and kind of the steps that we take to kind of migrate from a legacy chart of accounts to the new Workday. So what we kind of want to get into is, what exactly is a foundational data model, right? So I'll be referring to the FDM as the foundational data model. And what this does is it illustrates the power of one on Workday. So everything's all encompassing, whether it comes to HCM, fin, or student and payroll. And when we're developing the FDM and looking at your legacy chart of accounts and reviewing your old fin statements, we really like to encompass all those work tags with what we are pulling in. And really, when we're developing your work tags or your new structure for how you're going to be reporting externally and internally, we really want to look at, all the different aspects, from your security setup to how your HR BPs are going to work, to how your fin processes are going to work, all through how you do all your payroll. And really what this does is this lays out the foundation and our framework for the way that your system is going to be set up initially and how we're going to scale it toward the future. And again, what we really want to focus on here is that, when we're looking at the foundational data model, we look at it from the reporting aspect of it first, right? And so we like to take a look at all those external, whether it's an external fin statement, an internal specific niche report that you have, that as we're developing this, we kind of make sure that we can pull things out, because any ERP you can put data into, but the beauty of Workday is that it's an inherent cube, and the ability that you have to pull this information out of Workday is really what separates Workday apart from other systems. And so what the foundational data model is not, we really strive to challenge folks to not reinvent the same wheel, right? So there's a lot of ability that Workday has to streamline some processes. A good example is there's a lot of manual adjustment entries at the end of a period, a lot of manual adjustment entries at the end of a year, sometimes amortization events, recurring journals, and a lot of times we can get away with that, especially some specific allocations as well, because since Workday's an inherent cube, we can streamline a lot of your processes. And so as we're developing a new chart of accounts with all the Workday work tags, we really try to look at what you're doing currently and utilize all the efficiency gains within Workday from the processes and from, our cube ability really to kind of, scale and transform you from where you were to this new Workday world. And so this number 2 here on, a chart of accounts as defined by a traditional fin accounting system. And Workday, when we say general ledger, we mean general ledger, not super detailed ledger. We like to make sure that, we are utilizing and leveraging the power of Workday when it comes to, we keep all the detail of your transactions in these work tags, because those work tags allow all the reportability and the slicing and dicing that you get from these reports. And we have to keep your chart of accounts very general. And then again, this kind of rolls into number 3 there is, it's not really a one-to-one mapping exercise. At the end of the day, we're going to create a mapping, that shows where you came from and where you are, so that you always know what your legacy ledger accounts map to from a Workday perspective. but it's not a one-to-one mapping exercise. And, really what we feel at CS that really separates us is we challenge our customers to not reinvent the same wheel, but to embrace as much as Workday, as possible. And we understand that, you can't fully, dive straight into Workday, and there are some other processes that you may have to keep. However, we do really challenge you and work with you to try to pick up as many efficiency gains as possible. And this slide is really important because it kind of highlights just how really interwoven the foundational data model is in your Workday system, especially for those of you all that are thinking about going into full platform. When you think about the foundational data model, a lot of times folks think about finance, and that's very true. There's a lot of it. But there's a whole lot of elements in it that are deeply baked into the finance modules. But however, if you're doing HCM and payroll, you're still doing a foundational data model as well, because as you run payroll, that still, it still makes accounting entries, and you still have to make a mini FDM for those kind of, for all of those types of implementations. And so we're also able to do FDMs for just HCM and payroll projects, and even just HR projects as well, because a lot of times when you're going, a FIN phase 2, when you're implementing HCM at the beginning, you really want to make sure that you set up your org structure at the beginning, especially your supervisory orgs and your funds and anything that'll be rolling into payroll, in a way where when you do uptake financials on phase 2, that you can easily roll those orgs into your new foundational data model that are going to incorporate your new, all the new Workday work tags, from your spend to your revenue and your P&L, and anything from liability accounts and assets. So really, it's a whole encompassing picture here. And something else that we really try to think about as well is not just for your current implementation on where you're coming from. We really like to think about where you're going as an organization, because the beauty of Workday and this foundational, in this FDM and, the whole one power and how everything's interwoven is, if you do it correctly and you do it the right way, you're able to scale this for the future. So there's not a lot of, GL reconfiguring, or that there's not a lot of additions, aside from outside work tags. So where you kind of adding new GL accounts, and you're kind of putting yourself in holes where you have inactive or defunct ledger accounts or work tags or things like that, because when you set up the FDM correctly the first way, you're able to really embrace new Workday functionality as it comes out, and you're really able to embrace the scalability of the system as a whole. Because again, I'm going to say this a few more times, Workday is an inherent cube, and because it's an inherent cube, there's a lot of neat things that you can do from a scalability factor that'll really help you in the future. And so, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before. When we're doing this FDM, really, it's all for naught if we can't pull this data out, right? Because again, any system, it doesn't matter what you go with, from just small ERPs or QuickBooks or whatever, all the way up into Workday. You can put information in any of those. It's the power on how you pull it out. And I'm going to show that to you here in a few of my examples in our demo tenant. But when we're doing this FDM, as we're going through and pulling out all your work tags on your spend, on your revenue, your equity, all your balance sheet, you really start to look at those financial statements and those reports that you have to put out, especially if there's any kind of legal ramifications, if it's industry specific niche reporting, or if you're, in the whole E&G space, like if you've got those legal thin statements that you have to give to, a local entity, a state entity, or a federal entity, we like to make sure that, we are strongly looking at those as we create a chart of accounts, because we don't want to get to the end of our journey here, and when we go live, we're not able to pull this information out. And so we really pride ourselves, and that comes with our, we've never failed a project, or 100% rate is, we really strive and challenge to make sure that we accomplish all of this at the front, because the more elbow grease that we put in at the beginning, the easier our testing is, and the easier it is for you guys to pull out all the information that you need for external reporting. And also it makes your month ends easier, it makes your year ends easier, and there's a lot less data editing that you have to do outside of the system with macros, or if you're using vision reports or any kind, or just any kind of like Oracle BI reports, anything like that. there's a lot less data editing that you have to do outside, just because inherently Workday is a cube. And when we're developing this foundational data model, this is paramount to us to try to capture all those dimensions upstream, so it's easier for you to spit out a report. And I'm going to show you how some of that works here when I log into our AMU tenant. And so without further ado, I'm going to log into a tenant here, and I'm going to do a demonstration of a journal entry. And then I'm going to kind of walk you through what the work tags are and kind of how I'm entering this in. And then after that, I'm going to run a trial balance report. And I'm going to show you guys, how you can run a report, how you can kind of drill into the work tags and do, and just kind of do that cube reporting. Okay, so what we have here is the AMU tenant. It stands for Alma Mater University. It is a Workday demonstration tenant that just has a lot of, it's got a lot of setup data in it. It's all fake. It's all fake names, all fake GL transactions, things like that. But it's really helpful in situations like this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a journal. And before I start this, all these business processes are stripped down, so everything's going to auto approve. What you can do though, and what, and this is rarely ever in real life where, in a customer's true tenant where we'll have a business process as important as the journal BP stripped down. We're just doing this just so that everything auto approves just for the sake of time. But when we create your FDM, as part of that interdependency is our security model as well. So all these orgs that we're putting on and all these tags that we'll be putting on this journal, I'm going to drill into them, and you'll see how there's security roles that are able to be embedded. And with those roles, we're able to create BP rules and, and rails to kind of give you all the control mechanisms that you need to run your business from an auditability standpoint and from, just a standpoint on, segregation of duties and things like that. All right, so we're going to get into the journal BP here, and I'm just going to enter in, we're going to enter this in for the AMU Foundation actuals. I'm just going to put in some high-level journal header information here. All right. Okay, so as you can see down here on the journal, we've got a header company and we've got line companies, so we are able to do, intercompany journals and things like that. So I'm just going to do something really simple here. I'm just going to do travel. Let's just hit accounts payable. Let's do a number that's wacky here. All right. So the unique thing here when it comes to the FDM and as we're developing your business processes and things too is all these fields here are highly customizable, and you can add different columns. You can make certain things required, since we're in an AMU tenant, which is typically an ENG, you'll see fund has an asterisk. So fund is going to be required on everything because not only do we balance on company, just out of the box, Workday balances on company, you're able to balance on fund as well, and you're able to optionally balance on several other work tags to meet any kind of needs that you may have for running, a balance sheet on different organizations. And when we're developing your foundational data model and we're walking through your processes, another, an often overlooked aspect of it is your user experience and how your users are going to enter in, all of this information. And so as we're developing that, as we're looking at the FIN reports and the, and the HCM reports, internal reports, we also like to look at the whole usability of it, because if it's difficult for your users to input this data, it's going to be difficult for you guys to run all of these, all your journal transactions, invoices. And so we also really strive not just focusing on our nuts and bolts of this, but also focusing on the user experience from a UI and a data integrity standpoint by helping them enter in the proper information. So it's just, we're going to put in a cost center, which is typically a department in Workday. And you'll see here how when we entered in a cost center, this auto-populated in the fund and a program, right? So in Workday, and one of the beauties of Workday too is not only, I keep harping on it's an inherent data cube and you can pull information out. From a data input perspective, it's pretty streamlined as well. This is something that we like to look at to help with our user experience. I keep on saying that as well. But you can see here on the cost center, this cost center itself, which is representative of a university, the IT area, you can add affiliate work tags. So when you select information technology, it'll auto-populate in other work tags. So your users don't have to manually put in operating fund 01 and institutional support 50. It'll automatically do that for them. So what this does, it does two things. It helps with the ease of use, and it also helps with your data integrity, right? So, gone are going to be those days where somebody miscodes, a transaction, or or fat fingers, a thing that you have to go in at the end of the month and do a manual accounting entry, or do a year-end entry. And again, hopefully, we can't do this with everybody, but we try to. Hopefully, gone are the days when you have a miscellaneous account that you have to look at, you have to reconcile at the end of the year or end of the month, because you fix a lot of these things upstream. And the last thing I'll get on with the orgs is all the orgs as well. So the orgs that we're entering in on this journal right here, these orgs themselves can be set up in a hierarchy manner. So for instance here, information technology falls under the information technology cost center hierarchy. And then this goes all the way up to operations. And so what you'll see here, if we navigate this org, is something else that we look at is not only just from a GL perspective and from a ledger summary, things like that, we can organize these cost centers in multiple hierarchies or trees so that you can streamline extra reporting. So it just gives you an extra lens to segregate your transactions by. And you can do this with any org in Workday, whether it's a spend category, a revenue category, a company, a fund. They all have their own inherent hierarchy, so that gives you more dimensions to organize and report on. So I'm going to go back to our journal here, and we're going to enter in, since this is accounts payable, we don't really need a lot on the balance sheet. So we're just going to put a supplier here. Let's just put Amazon. We're traveling with Amazon. I'm going to show you some of the controls that Workday has, right? And again, the reason why I'm showing you these is because these are directly related to how you set up your foundational data model. So if I were to try to submit this journal, it's going to give me several errors, and it highlights where these errors are. And so really, it's telling me, I need a balancing work tag because, in our tenant, we're balancing on funds. So it's not going to let me make an unbalanced journal. And then once I add that fund in, it's going to let me submit this journal. And I'm just going to put a spend category here. Pick whatever. And we're going to submit. And so now once this goes through, you'll see it auto-completed. Again, this is because it's a stripped BP. Usually in the real world, you'd have lots of other steps, approvals. So now what I want to show you guys is I want to run a trial balance report and just kind of show you that transaction that we just did. So again, one of the fantastic things about Workday, everything's real time. There's no batch processing, none of that. And so when you run a trial balance here, I already have a save filter, so I don't have to input in all these values. But really, again, this is just part of when we're developing your foundational data model. We're going to look at these reports because not everybody uses the out-of-the-box versions of the Workday reports. However, a lot of folks use, 80 or 90% of them, and we kind of tweak it, right? So for your very specific reports, like your external financial statements that you're reporting to external entities, those are going to really be custom that we can create with our composite reports. But really, a lot of the out-of-box reports work very well with the FDM. We can tweak those for industry or customer-specific needs. So I'm just going to run this right here. We're doing it for August, which is where I put that journal in. And you'll see here, again, since it's the demo tenant, there's not a whole lot of information on here. But what you can see is, make this a little bigger for you guys. You'll see that we've got, there's a couple transactions in our travel, so our debit here and our credit. And what's good about this is we can actually open this up and we can slice and dice this by other fields, right? So you'll see all these work tags are on your journal. And, just out of the box reporting, there's things that you can do, like you're able to look at certain ledger accounts by fund. So, everything here is with one fund, so it's operating, and you can slice and dice it by fund and by cost center, right? So And again, it's operating fund, and it's just by the IT cost center. So there's a lot of dimensionality that you get from this foundational data model. And oftentimes in the sales process, or when you're going through your vendor, when you're doing your due diligence, the Workday solutions architects do a really fantastic job of demonstrating the power of Workday, but oftentimes they have, 3 or 4 hours to do 8 hours worth of work in demonstrations. And so it's a very quick process, and sometimes it's hard to visualize what your data would look like within Workday. And so let me go back into the presentation here. We did the transaction overview and the report overview. And so really that process that I just showed you is why we do this FDM Readiness workshop. And what it does is it really demonstrates Workday. It demonstrates those transactions that I showed you, and typically we'll also add in a supplier invoice. If there's any kind of P2P process, we'll start from the rec and we can show a PO, any kind of RFQ processes. On the revenue side, we can show rev recognition, things like that with your work tags, right? So when I say your work tags, what we'll do, and I'll get into our inputs here in a second, but the workshop really takes inputs from you guys as a potential Workday customer, and it allows us to take your chart of accounts at a high level and really transform it into the Workday work tags. And what this does is it helps you see the future state a little better, because you can visualize it better when it's data that's more relevant to you. And you could also touch and feel it and see how it looks in a tenant when you're doing everyday tasks that you typically do, such as a journal creation, an invoice generation, and things like that. And what's also important about it is it allows you to kind of get a head start on what your implementation may look like, because once your users know, or once you as an organization kind of understand the way that these work tags work and how they can be utilized in, a transaction or in a report, or just even the security model that could be governed by them, what you can do is you can start doing that work at the beginning to kind of prep yourself, right? So, the FDM is, it's so much more than just the nuts and bolts of tagging a P&L transaction, or, equity or a balance sheet. It helps you get insight into, well, we've got a vendor master list, and that's going to be one of our elements here for the foundational data model. We got to tidy that up and clean that up. Our customer list needs to be tidied up. Maybe we have, old projects and grants and things like that we may not need to kind of bring over. So it kind of helps you look at the holistic picture. And it also helps you kind of get a grasp on how you want to do all your data conversion as well, because that's a big pain point for folks. And it's an area that, it's coming from a relational database to object-oriented. It's a big leap, we recognize that, and it's not, it's a little scary, frankly, right? Because you're coming from something that that's tried and proven, and and that's been there for years, to this new system. And so by understanding the foundational data model, how the work tags could potentially work, it helps you get a jump start just on just about every facet of the project. When you're thinking about your data conversion, it's going to help you realize, well, this is how we're going to pull things out. Maybe this is the amount of years that we need to bring over, and we have to, that we have to legally, hold. And it also helps you think about, if you're going to be streamlining and redesigning your chart of accounts, what level of granularity do you need to report on, from, past years. So it really just kind of helps you all encompassing kind of jump in there and really move with it. And then also what's great about it too is, this last box is probably the most important one, right? Like, it's knowledge sharing, right? And that's what we're here doing right now is you really get to kind of see what these sessions are going to be like, what the outputs are, and really how the interaction would work with these, senior Workday experts, because it's not just going to be me doing these things. We have lots of other leads in our practice, a lot of really talented folks that have done these before, that have gone full platform phase 1, 2 live, and that, and they've worked in many different types of industries, from E&G to, services, all over, sports teams all over the place, right? So you'll be able to learn from these folks and get their information to kind of help you make an educated choice on how you want to go about your foundational data model, how you want it to work, and then what's most importantly, how you're going to set up your system and scale it for the future. And then, again, and it's not a lot of effort and cost to to you guys, because, all we need here, and I'm going to kind of get into, how it's going to help, is that there's not a lot of upfront inputs from you guys that we need. It's really just a lot of broad brushstrokes and showing you with your data and just kind of allowing the light bulb to naturally turn on. And so what this does is there's a lot of FUD, right? Especially going into Workday, because, you're going to see a lot of canned environments, a lot of, sterile vacuumish type, AMU tenants and GMS tenants and staged information. But what this does is, and all that looks great, right? But, a lot of times when we see that, folks are thinking, well, yeah, this looks great, but it's not my information. And so what this does is it really allows the entire organization or all the stakeholders involved to see, hey, these work tags can work. Workday does work. It's just now we're actually seeing it with our data. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, when we're going through vendors and when you kind of do sales, is when you're picking what software to go with, it's hard and there's not a lot that can show you your data. And there's not a lot that can actually walk you through one of your niche transactions, like how do we do a bond payment? How do we issue debt? How do we do, a balance sheet by a specific org, or in this type of end of year equity transition transaction. So there's lots of things that we can do, because we realize not every company is identical. Heck, I mean, even organizations that are doing the same type of line of business and the same types of industries could operate in different ways. And so really what this does is it really strengthens, our credibility. It strengthens Workday's, and, it shows that these work tags can work for you, and it really demonstrates what Workday can do with your data, and it really shows you the inputs and the outputs. And again, that kind of moves down into our second bullet here is, it's all practical, right? Because it's not staged or canned. It's actually your data, and it's a practical application of these work tags in Workday. So it really is the rubber meets the road, and it shows you how this works. And then also it's interactive, and I think that's the most important part of it. On top of showing your data, your transactions, the whole interactive aspect of it is what's important, because it allows for a back and forth. In some cases, it even allows for actual hands-on with an individual to log in. And what's great about this is you can kind of really see what works, what doesn't. You can really test out, our controls, our validations, how the business processes work with the FDM. And that's what's important, because a lot of times on demonstrations, you're being told. There's not a lot of back and forth, and if there is, there's very, but there's not too much of it, because there's this quick timeline, and and folks have to get through all their demos in a certain amount of time. And so this allows for a more relaxed, laid back environment, I guess I could say, where you can just have a more casual conversation and a more practical conversation about, hey, we want these types of transactions, or we want to look at the system from this aspect. Can the system do this specific type of transaction? Can it run this type of, external report or internal? And just most importantly, can it work for us, right? And so, and I feel that through having these types of interactive sessions, you can really dive deeper and make sure that you can make the right call, and it really helps you springboard into your, into your Workday implementation. And then again, just at the very bottom, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, is it gives you all insight. It shows you how we work. It shows you what the cadence of these, architect sessions will be like. And it really shows you that this whole implementation is a journey, and it's not just you guys doing the work. We're there every step of the way. We're challenging you to learn the Workday methodology. We're challenging you to take ownership of Workday. We're challenging you to just make the most of this Workday system, because at the end of the day, our success is your success, and that's how we gauge ourselves. And we really take that upon ourselves to make sure that, we're a good fit for the folks that we implement for, and that folks are successful. Because we feel if we start off on this foot and we start off where everybody's ready come the first day of Architect, we get so much more done, so much more quicker, and it gives us more time to test and refine and make sure that we shut down all those little loose ends or those little holes that are in your FDM or that are in your setup as a whole, so that you're more successful as you go live and on, in the future. Because we would love to hear from you after our go live, but if we don't hear from you too much, that means that we probably did a good job. All right, so the way that this process works, I've talked a lot about, what this readiness workshop is, what a foundational data model is, kind of showed you, what some of these transactions are, some of the orgs and some of the outputs, but, how does this workshop work? Usually we like to have about 2 weeks. We've done it in as little as, 3 or 4 days for some very quick sales cycles. But, usually it's about, a 2-week time, and, it doesn't even take, at the beginning for the inputs, it doesn't really take a lot of, there isn't even any on-site time required. It's just really a couple hours to get a chart of accounts and to get some key questions and inputs from you as a customer. And some of these inputs are, we like to see what the breakdown of your chart field structure is, because usually folks have, hyphenated chart fields, maybe there's, maybe they're kind of spread out, as it is in some old SAP implementations, or, some RDBSs have different kinds of elements. So we really just like to capture what all of those elements are and try to level set, what are the types of transactions that you would like to see, what are your pain points, and what are things that you're really apprehensive about. Because what we like to do is we like to take some of your most complicated transactions and processes and really, put that in Workday and demonstrate to you the power of this FDM and the power that Workday can actually give you, and just to show you that this can work. And then after we get, all those inputs and the pain points and just kind of a definition of what your chart of accounts is, we have some offsite prep, which is where we'll go into a tenant, which is a Workday environment, like what I just showed you with the AMU tenant, and we'll load in some of your data, right? So we're not going to load in any proprietary stuff, anything that needs to be, anything that's not available for the consumption of the whole group. And then what we do is we load that in. We run a bunch of demo transactions. We make sure that we can see those transactions in the past. We can run reports. We put the proper security in place, obviously at a high level. It's not a full-fledged implementation. And then we come back on site and we walk through it with all the stakeholders for half a day or a full day. It depends how much time, we feel that is needed. And then after that, we do an executive readout. But that on-site walkthrough is really, really important, and it's a really great session, and it's a great use of everybody's time, because you're getting tangible work done. Folks are understanding what the process is going to look like from an architect session standpoint. They're seeing how these transactions are going to be input. They're looking at the controls that are going to be tagged to these transactions, and most importantly, they're looking at the entire process from end to end. So there's nothing in a vacuum. There's nothing staged. The only thing that's staged are extra transactions that we load in, but we're able to walk you through transactions. So it's no smoke and mirrors. There's none of that. It's wire to wire. This is the inception of the transaction, and this is a report readout of it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we do. And then at the end of the readout, we just kind of do, here's what we did. We're going to tell you what we showed you. We're going to show it to you, and then we're going to tell you what we already showed you, right? So that's kind of a readout, and then we're going to kind of address all those pain points and some of those high-level key items that we wanted to hit that we got from the inputs, and just make sure that everybody has a full understanding. Because at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that you have a full understanding of what we're doing. And that's one of the most important parts of this, is to make sure that you guys you can make an educated choice, and you completely understand the way that the FDM is going to work, and that you kind of are angled and pivoted in the right direction to take a great and effective first step when you get into your implementation. The great thing about this is, you can do it in, whether you're E&G, whether you're, a fin services company, if you're retail, sport, any kind of industry, we can do this for. And then it's not just finance. It's like I said in the beginning, is if you're just doing HCM and payroll, we can also do one of these as well, and just kind of show you at a high level, here's your cost centers. This is what that's going to look like. This is your supervisory orgs. This is kind of what it's going to look like. And, especially if you're thinking about doing finance in phase 2, or maybe you're thinking about, just doing HR first and payroll and then taking a break and then rolling off when you have a subscription expiring, or, if you're looking to, do an RFP in the upcoming years, we can make sure that you are scaled to adopt Workday financials. Because sometimes what we see is when we do these readouts, or if we go to a customer that's implemented HCM prior, they may have implemented in a way where their supervisory orgs don't really make sense with their cost centers, or when they did a mini FDM for payroll, their earnings codes are mapped a certain way that doesn't really make sense from a GL perspective, so that there's a lot of rework that has to be done. And this helps you alleviate a lot of those issues and just get out, just kind of get out in front of that so that no rework needs to be done. And so, again, the way that we leverage this, it's kind of like what I said, in the past there is, at the end of the day, it's about knowledge transfer, and it's about making sure that we get the right information in front of you all as a stakeholder, and, as you all as a potential customer, to make an educated choice on how you want to utilize Workday, how you want your reports to look, and really just a total understanding of how your legacy chart of accounts is going to be transformed into this scalable FDM that you'll be able to use for years to come, because that's the, again, I'm going to say this one last time because I really want to harp on it. You guys can probably tell is you can put data in any system that you choose, but the beauty about Workday is how you pull this data out. And we really like to show you how that data can be pulled out, and the way that we can streamline this from not just data input from a transaction, but how your security model looks, how your BP routing looks, how your controls look, things from an audit standpoint, from internal, external, and really how, in the past you may have 10 reports that you have to do, but in Workday, one report can suffice, and that's one of the big things that we do in that executive readout, to show you efficiency gains. And I think by looking at, this process isn't a Guggenheim, it's not rocket science. It's a thing that we can all do, and it's a journey that we take together, and we guide you, and we leverage all of our experience, as John spoke about earlier, all the Fin customers that we have, our product leads in the Workday ecosystem, and like, and really all the financials go lives and the FDMs that we've already done, we just leverage that experience to assist you in building this thing for the future. And so with that, I'm gonna, I know we have some extra time here for our Q&A. I'm gonna hand it back over to Kate. For the questions. And Kate, if you're talking, you may be on mute.
Thanks, Matt and John. We've had a few questions come in, so let's just jump right in. Matt, the first question is for you. Could you explain what you mean when you say Workday is an inherent data cube?
Yeah. So what I mean about that is I can actually, I'm still sharing my screen here, right? Everybody can see this. So let me show you. So I'll tell you and I'll show you. What I mean by Workday is an inherent data cube is you can slice and dice it, right? So you don't need to spit out a table. So you don't just run a report that is a, we have reports right here, that are columns and they're rows. But the thing with Workday is when I say it's a cube, you can actually drill into these numbers here and pull out the different work tags in these different orgs, right? So it's not just, in some of the legacy systems, you can run this, and what it's going to do is it's just going to give you a number, right? Like, and this number is 999. I don't know what makes up this 999, but that's what it is. But when I say cube, you can actually drill into this, and you can see what makes up that 999. And then also what you're able to do is you can even slice and dice it even more here by looking, so right here we can look at it by our cost, by all these different orgs. And so when you look at this here, these are all the potential different types of orgs that in this tenant, obviously this is all customizable, you can set this up. these are all the different ways that you can slice and dice this. And so that's what I mean by it's a cube, because it's a natural pivot table, really. And that's one of the things, it's the beautiful part of Workday, but it's also the curse, because when you look at this, when I say, all right, this is a trial balance, it's a plain Jane trial balance, right? But we've got all these different work tags, and you can run reports. So when I, try to run this report back, so I'm going to go back to my filter criteria. When I filter on work tags here, not only can I pick the exact, I can pick information technology as a cost center, I can also pick the hierarchy, right? And the same thing with anything else, spin category hierarchy, expense item group. So there's a wealth of things that you can do with this. And that's the beauty of Workday, is that we can naturally capture a lot of these different reporting requirements based on how we set up the orgs. But the painful part on your end is that there's a lot of, it's almost paralysis by there's just this whole new big sandbox. And that's where we try to help you and angle you in the right area and focus you on where to really spend most of our time on from an organizational standpoint, so we can get those external reports. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Matt. We have one more question for you. What is the difference between an organization and a work tag?
Yeah, so an organization and a work tag are the same thing, essentially. So in Workday, you can really tag anything that you can tag to a transaction is essentially a work tag. So in Workday, we have what's called organizations. And so when you look at these organization types, especially on the costing side, we've got our cost center, we've got our company, our cost center, our location region. All of these are work tags that you can tag to a transaction, but they're also called orgs because they're organizations. And what you mean by organizations is you can hire people into these, you can, add security, on these, and you can use these for BP routing. So, essentially an org and a work tag are the same thing. It's just anything that you can tag to a transaction.
Great, thanks. Another question came in that says, defining work tags is critical to effective deployment of Workday. How do you get your customers to explain their current ledger?
Yeah, so that one is more of an art than a science in some cases, right? Because when you go in and you look at a legacy ledger, there's all sorts of things in there, right? So you've got, especially if folks have been using the same chart of accounts for 10, 15 years, there's lots of tribal knowledge, if you will, that are in certain areas of the chart of accounts, and it's almost like a trip down memory lane when you're looking at it. So there's different ways, but what we like to do is we like to split it up to the different types of accounts, right? So you've got your P&L accounts, depending on how the organization is really set up, we either engage the financial accounting team at the beginning and get the core accountants that have all that knowledge, and then we'll start involving folks from the other departments like revenue, AP, and then, folks from if there's any kind of assets or things like that, and really start analyzing all these, all their accounts. And so, in some cases, if it's a smaller chart of accounts, we can actually go through those one by one with you. In some cases, you have to for some niche entries, but a lot of times we spend some work stream meetings, and at the beginning of the project, it's very heavy with the FDM work because, again, a lot of it is more knowledge transfer. A lot of it is showing you what the process is, how you can pull out spend categories from your expense accounts, how you can pull out revenue categories from all your revenue. And then, on your liabilities, those are very unique because on your liability accounts, there could be many different types. You could have a specific payables liability. You could have a receivable liability that you're doing a debit to and you're crediting, things that are being loaded up from payroll that you're paying out. So there's a lot of things that we go through, but at the beginning, we spend a heavy amount of time segregating your chart of accounts, looking at your reports and teaching you how to pull out those work tags, and not only teaching you how to pull those work tags out, from pulling out, this legacy string equates to this type of cost center, this type of spend category, if you're E&G, this fund or this program or however, and really showing you that not only are you pulling out those work tags, but you're also able to organize those work tags in hierarchies. And we really start looking at your fin statements and your managerial reports as we're pulling that out. And so really it's not just you doing all the work. It's more of a, it's more of a team effort there, especially at the beginning. And then as you get more comfortable doing that, and as we're angling and we get the right habits in place from whenever we create a new work tag, we're looking at it from a reporting standpoint and a usability standpoint, we can start giving you homework so that you can do it on your own.
Thanks, Matt. Next question. How are changes made if adjustments are necessary after testing?
Yeah, so that's a good question too. So the goal is in testing is to not have any crazy changes as it pertains to like scope, but it's like, it's going to happen, right? So you're not going to get your FDM done at the beginning all the way. There's going to be things that happen in testing that are going to maybe change the way you want to use a certain org, change the way you want to do a custom validation on a VP, just there's lots of little things that change, and we know that that's going to happen. Like the FDM is a fluid thing and it runs parallel to the other parts of your project, because you're going to be designing your AP VPs or your procurement VPs and like you're going to be doing other things on the different functional areas within Workdays, like, your expense reports and you're going to be loading in assets and converting customers and things like that. All that runs parallel to as we define this FDM. And there's going to be little changes, right? So even up to go live, you're probably going to make minor tweaks to your FDM because that's just the nature of the beast, because your real world doesn't stop while you're doing this implementation. So we account for that, when we're doing all these projects. The one thing that we do not want to do though is, for instance, if we, for instance, say, hey, we're going to use program as this one big fundamental thing that is mission critical to the success of your, of your day-to-day operations from a internal and external standpoint. What we don't want to do is completely redesign the whole thing. But that's why we put a lot of emphasis at the beginning to make sure that as we're designing the initial go-around of your chart of accounts, that we're looking at the reporting aspects of it, and we're looking at the usability aspects of it. Because that, anybody can do a lift and shift in Workday and just pull some work tags out and throw it on there. But that's the lazy way of doing it, and that's not what we pride ourselves on at CS. Is we really try to make sure that when we get into testing, we understand there's going to be changes. Like that's just how it is. Because things look really good on a whiteboard, but then in practicality, they may not look that good. So there will be changes that's accounted for in our projects and in our methodology, especially. But we really try to make sure that we set the foundation. We put the foundation in the foundation model at the very beginning of the project to make sure that we're all aligned and we're pivoted. So if you're 1 degree off at the beginning of the project, when you get to the end of testing, that 1 degree could turn to 30. So we just try to make sure that we're right on target. And also, as the project goes on, we have, weekly work stream meetings. So we're always in touch with you, and we're always making sure that any changes or any design decisions that are made, they're always captured, and there's always a reason why a design decision was made, especially from a cross-functional standpoint, because there is, there's a lot of cross-functional things in Workday, but the FDM is the antithesis of our cross-functional because it affects everything.
Thanks, Matt. All right, we are approaching the end of the hour, so if we haven't gotten a chance to answer your questions, we'll follow up with you shortly. Thank you for everyone's time today. We'll follow up by email this week to share a link to a recording of today's presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reply back to that email, or you can reach us through the contact section of our website, and we'll be happy to talk more with you. Thanks, and have a great day.